Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a Dracula showdown when I put John Badham's Dracula against Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And with this video, I mean, we're not going to really deal much with plot because, I mean, shit, they've been making Dracula for over 100 years, and so they really haven't moved much from the plot since then. So basically, what we're going to look at in this video is who did the better Dracula, which one's the better movie, and we'll just basically go down the tick marks, because this is original versus remake, but they're not even the 70s isn't the original. Of course, the original shit came about in way back in 1922 when F.W. Murnau did Nosferatu, which was an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And then the official one came out in 1931 when Todd Browning did Dracula with Bela Lugosi, which is the most iconic one. But by the time the 70s rolled around, the fucking Dracula legend had been done to death, specifically by Hammer Horror Studios and even Universal Studios before that, because of course, there were sequels, there were remakes and all kinds of shit, And so you get John Badham coming off of Saturday Night Fever tackling Dracula. And then in the role of Dracula, we have Frank Langella, who, not a bad looking Dracula, but doesn't really sound, just sounds like Frank Langella, And the thing about this Dracula is they just jump right into it. They don't even it opens with Dracula on the Demeter going to fucking London and shit, and which is an interesting choice because you don't really deal with none of the Renfield or Harker shit, and just jumps right into it. And the film itself is very the cinematography is very desaturated color, so it almost looks like it's been shot in black and white. For the most part, the film is very bland. But there are some very striking visuals here and there. There are those sequences where you see Frank Langella as Dracula climbing down buildings and stuff, and there are sequences that are genuinely creepy, but it's really just Frank Langella doing the heavy lifting as Dracula, and he's not even really trying that hard. You've got Laurence Olivier as Van Helsing, which is very fucking lame. Donald Pleasance plays Dr. Seward. And even the dude playing Renfield is pretty fucking lame. Like I said, for the most part, this is a film that's just, it doesn't do other than just doing that one artistic choice of just jumping right into Dracula showing up in London. That's pretty impressive, Even the ending is very kind of anticlimactic in a certain way. It does end in a different spot than most Dracula movies, but it doesn't really do much else, And of course, when you look at Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, this movie is the fucking definition of indulgent, But that is Francis Ford Coppola, If his films weren't indulgent, it wouldn't feel like a Francis Ford Coppola movie. And now this is around the time this motherfucker was doing that movie Jack with Robin Williams. And, somewhere in between Jack and the Rainmaker, he does Bram Stoker's Dracula. And here we got Gary Oldman playing Dracula, and he is nailing the accent too. He definitely kind of has that, the Transylvanian accent, I guess, is very close to what Bela Lugosi sounded like in Todd Browning's Dracula. And, the cast is very impressive in this film. You got Tom Waits playing Renfield, who just absolutely crushes. He's the only one that might be better than Gary Oldman in the film. Now, for as good as the cast is too, there are some pretty lame actors. Now, Winona Ryder, she's fucking great in this film. She is. It definitely takes a wild turn. And Keanu Reeves, a very shitty actor. He's trying to do an English accent, and it is just lame as fuck. And Anthony Hopkins, who might be one of the most overrated actors of all time, he's doing a pretty decent job as Van Helsing. But honestly, like I said, the best actors in this film are Gary Oldman and Tom Waits, hands down. And honestly, Winona Ryder's up there too. You can't really discount her performance in the film. And of course, you also get Richard E. Grant and Cary Elwes and Like I said, a very impressive cast. What's even more impressive is the look of the film. Of course, Michael Ballhaus did the cinematography. So anytime that man's doing your cinematography, like it's gonna be nothing short of brilliant. And the set design, production design, all that fucking shit. It opens with kind of the history of like who Dracula was, that whole Vlad the Impaler shit. Now, granted, it's very heavy-handed romance through the ages bullshit because the uh, Winona Ryder's character, she also looks the same as the woman that Vlad was married to and everything, and she killed herself thinking he had died and in the battle and all this shit. And they don't negate the whole Castle Dracula shit. Seeing like Tom Waits as Renfield in that nut house is fucking just par brilliance. I mean, he's even nailing the accent. And, of course, Richard E. Grant was a fucking wild man too, anything he was in. And, that whole, like, this movie gets fucking wild, man. Talk about sexy. It does have its moments. You get Dracula's brides, like, just fucking draining Keanu Reeves and all that shit. And, they come up through that bed and their first appearance and everything. Like, it's a fucking wild ass movie. And the special effects are fucking incredible. Because, like, even looking at John Badham's Dracula, the most you see is him turning into a bat. And, there's not much, new shit that we haven't seen before. But here in this Dracula, like, this motherfucker, of course, turned into wolves. They do have that in the John Badham Dracula. There's actually one really good transition where he jumps through the window and then turns into a wolf as he's leaving the window and shit. But it doesn't have that whole, like, he becomes like a whole other fucking creature in this shit. And you see him as that other creature, like fucking the shit out of that one redheaded chick, and just some insane shit. It's that animalistic charge that John Badham was trying to do. You see it a couple times in Badham's film, especially when Dracula is seducing Lucy or Mina, whichever one. But that whole little psychedelic looking, red background with the shadows and all that shit, you can tell that he was trying to do something more animalistic and primal. But Coppola actually achieved it because there's shit that he does with the camera and, of course, the correlation with animals and nature and all that shit. A lot of heavy handed, indulgent shit, but it works for Coppola in this film because, especially by the 90s, there wasn't nothing you could do that was too much different than anybody had done with Dracula before. And he fucking goes balls to the wall with it, especially that end chase sequence, because most Dracula movies just end so fucking lame. They find him in the castle and they just put the stake through his heart and all this shit, or there's some like fucking good versus evil debate confrontation bullshit. There really ain't none of that here. These motherfuckers are chasing him like it's a fucking western, and there's shootouts and fucking Winona Ryder cuts his head off and shit, the whole, and those, the scenes with Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder are fucking, talk about sexy and fucking intense, especially when, he attempts to sire her and, cuts the blood open and stuff, this, Coppola is, for lack of a better word, he's definitely unique as a filmmaker, but if anybody could put a unique take on this, it was definitely him. And I feel like he, other than F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, I feel like he has probably the best incarnation of Dracula. So this round clearly has to go to Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, which was also titled Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was all Bram Stoker's Dracula because he wrote the fucking book. It just depends on what director put it out there, because the thing about John Badham, not the best director, but he made entertaining movies. I don't necessarily think he was the right fit for Dracula. He kind of can check off all the boxes of the gothic shit that he needs to like fulfill making a Dracula movie, but to go as far as Coppola did, that shit is insane. Now, granted, the casting director could have did a lot fucking better, but they were trying to go so far for the sexy angle. You know, of course, you're pairing Keanu Reeves with Winona Ryder and stuff, but like I said, nobody can fuck with Gary Oldman in this film. Like Frank Langella on his best day couldn't do what Gary Oldman did in this Dracula film, and of course, Tom Waits is Renfield. I mean, there's other than the original Renfield in Todd Browning's Dracula, there's and also after more recently Nicholas Hoult in that movie Renfield. So that's about three Renfields that have been real standouts. And you know what? You got to give it to the guy in Mel Brooks's Dracula Dead and Loving It. I mean, that was a really good Renfield, for especially for a parody film that was below mid. But, like I said, Tom Waits fucking exceptional in this film. And the look of it, it's vibrant. It's definitely not boring. It's fucking batshit crazy, sexy. So, for anybody keeping score, that is 84 to 66. 70s are only up by 18 now. The 90s could come back, man. They come back with these 1-2 punches, but then the 70s put them back on the ropes. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I mean, this is just one asshole's opinion on a long, self-indulgent journey to see which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. The 90s come back here and there, but you never know. The 70s, they got a huge lead to crush before they can be back in the lead again, So 70s are still up by 18, but 90s can hit it every once in a while because, even somebody like Coppola who made his name in the 70s, he still had a few in the 90s that were very unique, but also at the same time, he was doing shit like Jack and the Rainmakers. So, and on top of it, even before that, Godfather 3 that nobody asked for. So, anywho, just better watch out how that vampire bites you.